For our project, we analyzed the movie Dallas Buyers Club.
First, context for the Dallas Buyers Club. It takes place in 1985 Dallas, Texas, where Ron Woodruff, the main character, contracts HIV. He reacts badly to AZT, which is a drug that's in the process of a trial because he illegally obtains it and takes it at wrong doses because he's afraid of getting the placebo in the trial. He distributes unapproved meds later for profit and forms the Buyers Club. And these meds are targeted towards treating the symptoms, not necessarily treating HIV. And by treating the symptoms, he planned to prolong the life expectancy of HIV patients. And he partners with Rayon, a member of the LGBTQ plus community who also suffers from HIV after meeting Rayon in the hospital.
So before we begin, I'd like to go over some terminology that you'll hear us mention throughout this presentation, just in case anyone is unfamiliar with some of these medical terms. HIV is known chiefly as a sexually transmitted virus. However, it can also be spread by shared needles or from a mother to a baby during pregnancy. The quote that I have here is from our academic source regarding HIV and AIDS, and it says that HIV initially infects the body, sometimes producing flu-like acute symptoms, then remains dormant in the infected person's body for anywhere from 2 to 20 years. So the difference between HIV and AIDS is that AIDS is a late stage of the HIV infection that leaves the infected person with a severely weakened immune system. This causes people with AIDS to be susceptible to many illnesses, and if they go unmedicated, they typically won't live longer than 3 years. However, modern medicine has grown in effectiveness since the time of Dallas Buyers Club, and people with HIV can often prevent AIDS and live long and healthy lives. Dallas Buyers Club takes place in 1985, during the peak of the AIDS crisis, a time when AIDS ran rampant among the U.S. population, mostly among homosexual men and intravenous drug users. However, anyone can become infected with HIV. During our presentation, we're going to be mentioning several different drugs that were used to treat HIV and AIDS at the time of Dallas Buyers Club, as well as drugs that our main character Ron used to treat himself and those who he sold drugs to. During the time that Dallas Buyers Club took place, AZT was the only approved option for treatment. However, we see Ron at odds with AZT throughout the whole film, because the high doses of AZT given to AIDS patients were highly toxic. Ron treated himself with peptide T, a medication that we know today to have little effectiveness, but Ron believed that it worked. Ron also used a drug called DDC that was a sister drug to AZT, which ironically was later found to have even harsher side effects than Ron's nemesis AZT. Today we take a different approach to treating HIV, prescribing patients complex cocktails of several different drugs meant to stop the virus from replicating and to stop the virus from infecting new cells. The drug AZT, which was found to be lethal at high doses, ended up being useful at much lower doses. Dallas Buyers Club highlights the way that health professionals approach treating HIV and AIDS, and how they often made things worse in the early years of AIDS research. The problem was that the only goal of medical professionals at the time was killing and eradicating the virus. And while this does sound like an effective way to cure a virus, we know now that the HIV virus is still not currently curable. While medical professionals were giving medication to kill the virus, they also sometimes ended up killing the patient. If medical professionals at the time had focused their effort not on eradicating the virus, but instead on giving the body immune support via other care methods, they likely would have been able to provide a longer life for many of these AIDS patients. However, we must remember that hindsight is 20/20, and that medical professionals were doing what they thought was best at the time.
The first social issue that's going to be discussed is the social perception of HIV and AIDS. And a scene shown to the right shows Ron holding his ex-friend in a chokehold after his friend refused to shake Rayon's hand. And the first perception of HIV and AIDS socially is the idea of exclusion, because that man that Ron has in a chokehold used to belong to his initial friend group, but after finding out that Ron had HIV, they excluded him based on homophobic notions of what it meant to have HIV. And going more into the homophobic culture, his refusal to shake Rayon's hand contributes to the idea of how HIV and AIDS is socially perceived due to the misinformed understanding of how the virus is transmitted, especially because Due to the large concentration of the virus being present in certain targeted lifestyles, they create certain homophobic notions of what it means to be a part of the LGBTQ plus group. And this social injustice, the exclusion, the homophobia, is shown through the emotional distress of HIV patients, specifically through the 5 stages of grief which Ron goes through. Now today, HIV and AIDS is perceived by the CDC as they describe the stigma to be the prejudice that comes with labeling an individual as part of a group that is believed to be socially unacceptable, meaning that they believe only certain people can get HIV. People tend to make judgments about people who actively try to take steps to prevent HIV transmission, and the idea that people deserve to get HIV based on their choices. The second social injustice discussed will be patient treatment access, and we're going to start with the clip in which Ron finally comes to terms with his diagnosis, and he tries to research all the possible different treatments, and he brings them to his doctor. And unfortunately, he doesn't have much hope, especially because the FDA hasn't approved the drugs from other countries. And in addition to this clip, you will see some homophobic content at the very end, when Ron seems to be desperate for any substantial, actual treatment to help him.
Here. How about this stuff overseas, huh? Germany, they got this dextran sulfate, all right? And they got this DDC in France, supposed to keep the healthy cells you got from getting the HIV. And they got AL721 over in Israel. How can I get some of this?
None of those drugs have been approved by the FDA.
Screw the FDA. I'm going to be DOA. Like, I got to sue the hospital to get my medicine?
Mr. Woodruff, I assure you that that would be a waste of your precious time. There is a support group that meets daily in Andrade Auditorium. I suggest you try it out. Maybe go talk about your feelings, your concerns.
I'm dying. You telling me to go get a hug from a bunch of faggots? Good day.
To review, Ron's treatment consists of a 30-day death sentence, and he can't participate in AZT trials. He struggles with the morality of a double-blind treatment, which essentially means that, and as he mentions, half the patients would receive a potential treatment and the other half would receive sugar pills. Unfortunately, this is necessary when testing the functionality of a new drug, but the movie exaggerated this in terms of his struggle with his disease. And he illegally obtains international medications, including peptide T and DDC, which shows the extent he had to go through for his treatment. Now, this social injustice is presented in which Ron has movement in his professional and personal life choices to obtain his desired treatment, which includes outward appearances while gaining wealth and forming a business for a purpose of providing treatments targeted towards controlling HIV symptoms. The last social issue discussed is Big Pharma's influence on availability of HIV medication. We'll first start with watching a clip in which Ron confronts the FDA, and there's an exchange of who actually is the drug dealer and in what case does the FDA not listen. Just a warning, there is some inappropriate language.
Mr. Woodruff, would you kindly tell us what you're doing?
Oh, I'm just giving people information, Richard. At this trial I'm in. To make sure they know what's going on.
What is going on?
Why'd you cut off peptide T, Richard? Huh? Non-toxic drug that I got proof works. And at the National Institute of Mental Health, your own people say it's completely safe.
Mr. Woodruff, I'm afraid that you are nothing more than a common drug dealer. So if you'll excuse us, we would like...
Oh, I'm the drug dealer. Now you're the fucking drug dealer. I mean, goddamn, people are dying. And y'all are all up there afraid that we're going to find an alternative without you. See, the pharma companies pay the FDA to push their product. All right, so fuck no, they don't want to see my research.
All right.
I don't have enough cash in my pocket to make it worth their while.
It's enough.
That's it right there. Tell you what, I'm going to be a pain in your ass when I'm 6 feet under.
Let's go,
and maybe one day you'll get off your ass and do your fucking job.
I need you to leave. Let's go.
Here, pass these around, would you? Here. Don't listen.
The idea this clip shows is that having more money makes you more valuable or more credible, especially when Ron says that he doesn't have enough cash in his pocket to make it worth the FDA's while. Now, this scene can be contradicted because peptide T, which is a protein that Ron used a lot, was never approved, and it's not used in daily and present treatments towards HIV. And his use of DDC is actually recorded to be just as toxic, if not more, as AZT, and soon to be AZT's sister drug. But of course, AZT, the drug that's being used in the movie for the trial, wasn't intentionally made to be toxic. They were just using a high dose to attack the virus because they felt they needed to attack it with full force. And they later arrived, with research, that smaller doses were just as effective and less toxic. But this social injustice of Big Pharma's influence is presented by romanticizing and exaggerating the role of the FDA in Ron's life because he claims that the FDA doesn't even look at his research, that they push drugs only due to money influences,